This is on anger and becoming my father's daughter, just exploring what it means. Just exploring what it means to inherit anger as a woman from one's father and just all the gendered connotations of that. So I'm going to read a short excerpt. If the transactional study of our gender-coded world suggests that young girls take after their mothers, as young boys after their fathers, then I certainly missed the memo. What strange formula of events led me to embody my father's behavior is currently unknown, but I wanted to be him in every way. I wanted to wear his clothes, walk the world with his cocky assuredness, be just as generously honest at work and relationships, and have a clear moral compass. The anger came with the arrangement. My mother and her mother, in an effort to contain my anger, often fueled it. By critiquing my walk and talk, my general boorishness with the world, the way my body had chosen its sharp edges and muscular stubbornness, my mother left me willing to embody my newly inherited anger. The thing about taking after a parent whom the world treats differently from you is that you become an unusual animal. I had begun to live and expect with the entitlement of a man in the forgetful body of a woman, in what is essentially a man's world. No matter how hard I tried, I could never fit in. My anger, when not childish, was an affront to the regulations of social upkeep. I was a misdemeanor waiting to be corrected, a cloth that had slipped off the clothesline made dirty. The world never sought to understand how I, a woman in a non-traditional body, hailing from a country that attacked its women with such impunity, could ever be mad. All of my emotion was colored by the tinge of unpredictability, no matter how justified its reasoning seemed to me. Womanhood, as my mother tried to teach me, was a performance of subtlety, passivity, and consideration. I failed the test. I failed my mother and the women who mothered me with her. I stuck out of their petaled gentleness like a danger signal. I had become so completely my father's daughter that I could never belong to my mother. The violence that passed between us bound us to a school of thought that hurt us both, but also held us together as a unit. I was drawn into his image. Each time he hit me, I looked, walked, sat, and spoke more like him. This isn't to say his anger toward me was productive, but it is to say that I took his violence and channeled for myself a freedom the world wasn't prepared to give me. Channeling my father's anger means I'm heard before I'm listened to. It's a wave of sensation that strikes me down, forces all my logical thinking and patience into a gridlock. It means that in anger, I feel my fingers tingle for a hit and my feet yearning to walk out or worse, clamp down. It means my nerves tighten, my speech loses its footing, my body heats up, and my back muscles ache with anticipation. It means pain and discomfort, fear and trepidation, disappointment and betrayal. Cowering under his rage also means that I'm so fearful of authority that I redirect all my anger at them toward myself. I punch walls with my knuckles, sweep objects off of writing desks, hurl my robust, handy phone at the floor, shake furiously, rouge up with shame. I sob easily because this is a world that cannot hold my discontentment with seriousness, and few people care for the way my anger consumes me whole. For every time my father has strut across this world holding his anger close, I have shrunk into the earth, wrapped in fistfuls of rage. The world never held space for my anger, so I had to unknot my nerves on my own dime. As a survivor of domestic rage, it was up to me to separate righteous anger from frenzy, political discontentment, from personal disagreement. I knew intimately how my body tensed up at the anticipation of violence, and I wanted a world where I didn't need that familiarity. So instead of taking my rage and becoming another barbaric iteration, I chose to become very fucking angry about the state of it all. The lines are clearer now. Anger at the state, for the female body, for the bodies rendered meaningless and invisible by institutional constructs, against injustice, unequal consumption, communal apathy, at disregarded public service, for my mothers, sisters, friends, and lovers, and the way their selves are left unseen, at being undervalued, disrespected, misrepresented, at the indifference to public anger, good. everything but toxic. Would I have tasted the metal of anger spooling on my tongue had I not spent every minute modeling myself after my father, a man who could strike with limbs and words alike? Would I have known confrontation if I hadn't looked my father in the eye and dared him to hit me again the last time he hit me? Would I have been as sensitive to state violence rearing its ugly head had I not understood that all violence is an act of establishing power? Would I have taken my anger and built small movements around it, passionately advocating for a world I can love if I had not had brimfuls of it? Would I have learned to treat our systems with impertinence had I not seen my father do so unashamedly? That is not for me to answer. All I know is that I took my rage and produced whole works of art from it. I forged relationships and communities and allowed myself to be moved by political rebellion. I sought and embraced everything my father could not as he channeled his anger after the father before him. That I took both our childhood damage and validated it with intention. I still cry when I'm angry. I shut myself in restrooms and wait for my face to stop burning. I bite my tongue when my voice is not required. I use it loudly when it can move people, just like my father taught me. Because my father is a man who grew up in a world that held his anger, he never thought to cry, to expunge himself of emotion. Because the world was incapable of holding his sadness, he never learned to speak its tongue. Whereas happiness could be a loud-mouthed laugh and his anger full-bodied, his grief had no place to call home. So when my father wept, bent over himself at the terminal gate of my departure from home, I saw him finally succumb to an unrelenting tantrum. I knew then that anger didn't drain so much as it overpowered. It took so much muscle, memory, and impulse that it left very little spirit for a good cry. I think of how easily crying comes to me on my angriest days, how generously it relieves me of all the baggage I take on from this world, how it has never been this easy for my father. I look at him, think less of the unpleasant years, and wish him the kindness of a good cry. May it come to him at an unexpected moment when he needs it the most. Thank you. I'm going to read a poem that just got published yesterday. It's the titular poem from my manuscript. It's a little long. Do I have the time to do that? Yeah. So this, I have a poetry manuscript that's ready, I think. I haven't edited it in a hot minute, so I'm hoping it's ready. And it's called Some of Many Women, and this is the titular poem. It's also the opening poem of the manuscript. This is Some of Many Women. Before I glided into an us, I lived still outside of this body, where I, this writer, watched the shock of pink splattered on a summer evening, the small men with big bellies, the line queued outside the ration store and cars flying past without honking, the wicked games children play in their brevity, unmoving like sacred, quiet like solitude, alone like friendless, and separated because this body was still strange, alien-like, godliness watching the first leg erupt from a small cell, or however all this came to be. Us was only you and I. You like mother, like salve, heat, sweat, and touch, like arms pulling my frailing length from drowning in a flooded gutter, like a long, well-oiled braid of hair that taught me what hair is, like color that asked for color, like hunger that feeds a meal, like eyes loud and gluttonous boring into mine. I learned to mark you, freshly condensed in your juices, watching me. I learned topography with my fingers running along your varicose veins. I draw portraits where each body is a version of your body and thus a future for my body. I sing songs in a lilt betraying my true intention. I learn to hold a note just to be heard. I cradle your stomach in my arms, paste my ears to its rupture, and listen to the world unveil itself with clarity. The sparrow's song is chirpier, the tree composes a tune to the rustling wind, the ground rumbling and attentive, the sky imminent and watchful, and the planets revolve to the same music as the maracas from songs you love, cha-ching, cha-ching in space. You point out the others, the young girl who watches her mother whiten, the aunt who stretches the seams of her sari with bony fingers, the fish lady who sits outside, there, under the crisp blue of bright summer with eyes beating out, not hers, but of the fish, the loose end of her skirt drying up hot sun, the very round woman in the local train who unpeels green peas that land in a tiny steel box like jewelry, the ticket collector who side-eyes women in the first class compartment with her thick round glasses, the young woman who leans dangerously outside the open vehicle with relentless long air, the child who pees shamelessly on the side of the road, the old grandma who smiles with her gap-toothed mouth split open, and the other mothers of your choosing. You learn to love it all, the women, their bedtime folk tales, how the Lord's Prayer lands on your tongue like a kiss and culls out of your racing heart a shrine. The world shatters into me like a conundrum, teaches me big words, and how to weep not from hunger and separation but in despair, how to swallow sadness for a meal and lodge it in the back of the throat, how to come out of violence splintered but pieced together with glue, the tears and cracks showing, how to sing along to the rhythm of the guitar, songs about love, sex, and politics. Sweetheart, I sing, show me more. Show me space turned pink from ecstasy, a woman lunging at the sky for a blanket, a boy liquefying into puddles, and better kisses. Show me kisses better than the Lord's Prayer. Show me how to move my hands, I cry, and where to place them. Show me how to read. There, in the music, I spot the others. The infamous sylph who spreads into conversations like a dirty secret. The mothers who named and shamed their growing bodies, the drowning women, the women who learned to swim, the women who began breathing underwater, grew gills and tails and everything, the women who began to live with children in tow in sunken ships, the women who cruised a vessel and manned a sail, the women stitched up with bunted bodies and fistful hearts, the women with hennaed hair, women with funky vaginas and saggy breasts and rolls of fat protecting their bodies, the fallen women, and the women who kneel willingly, staggering forward with bruised knees. I love them too, much to your horror. I revolt, dig at my itchy scabs, watch them ooze blood, embrace the chemical, frown down its acrid taste, and suspend like a question mark from your favorite tree. Your eyes convolute with disgust, your hands lunge at me like an animal, take my elbow and wring it like a wet cloth, hope for it to drain, among other things, this world. I return, bent and unchanged. The truth, I am my mother's daughter and I take to love fiercely. What do I know of sacredness and its obstinate rules when there's so much to touch outside its hold? I stockpile for the records, collect us under the canopy of the oldest tree and decree us a country. Scratch our surface, its peculiarity under my nails for DNA. Become a pallbearer for the dead and a poet for the willing. Be daughtered, mothered, sistered, and loved into a collective. Us, like land tearing itself from the violence of the whole continent, like water assembling into war, like a votive offering, like the chorus of a song. I, this writer, and you, mother, torn from fealty. You hadn't imagined that I could mother myself simply with attention. When I leave you all. Pull myself from earth like smoke airing the clouds, choke in its poison. In Urdu, the word hijr is both a separation from beloved and a desertion from country. When I leave you, I am both alone and homeless. Like a split clause, I carry this body like an ellipsis. When the man at the departure terminal tells me, you look like someone I know, I say, but of course I do. There can't possibly be just one of me. Thank you.